Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Talking Tech presentation. Today, we are going to be discussing making reports with W4. My name is Mel Ortiz, and I'll be presenting this webinar for you today. Note that I'm going to keep everyone on mute. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end. So a little overview. Reporting is basically the last step in the digital forensics process. This is where you present the product of all your hard work. It's kind of a pretty important step because you can be a great examiner, but if you can't write a good report detailing that examination, then that really isn't going to be doing much for you. I'm going to go over a few tips on writing a good narrative to make sure you're putting a little context to the report that you're exporting out with W4 or whatever tool you're using. To do this, we're going to make sure we're sticking to the facts. We want to make sure we're covering any limitations of our examination, and we also want to make sure that we are documenting everything. After that, I'll do a quick demo on creating reports with W4. So sticking to the facts, this means that we basically want the evidence to speak for itself. Let's say you're examining the internet history artifacts. We don't know for a fact that the suspect visited those websites, unless you have a video of them doing that, but that's not typically the case, right? For example, we never want to say the suspect visited X website on June 15th. A better way to word this is to say, according to the internet history stored in Google Chrome's History SQLite database, Windows user Dominic visited X website. The timestamps indicate that the visit was made at 1700 on June 15, 2020. And with that, you can basically point to the data and everyone can agree that that's an actual fact and it can be verified by anyone. Using the example above, some of the roadblocks we may run into is determining attribution. Since we are limited to the facts that are found in the evidence, sometimes you rely on other information to do this. So this is why reading the police report or having good communication with your investigator is really important. Some good things to cover in the report are where the evidence was found. Was it in the suspect's person, bedroom, or vehicle? Some good questions to ask the suspect are, did anyone else have access to this device besides yourself? Does anyone else know your password for the device, website logins, etc., things like that? You need to make sure that your investigators know to ask these questions because they will help build attribution later in your report. And these are things that you want to include in there. Sometimes you need to rely on the artifacts themselves for this information. The suspect may be taking selfies of themselves shortly before they commit their crimes. They may be signing into their bank account that only they have access to right before visiting suspicious websites. You might see that all of the accounts associated with the device are under their name. If it's a mobile device, you can determine that it's the user's phone number and that they're probably paying the bill. All of these different things help build attribution. So the other thing is that it should be easy to read. We don't want to be too technical, is the first thing, because a lot of the people reading your report, they're lawyers, they're officers. If it goes to trial, you're going to have the judge and the jury, and they're not going to understand a lot of what's in there if they're not technical people. The last thing you want to do is have their eyes gloss over as they're reading it, especially if they don't understand a lot of what's in there. So a good idea is to explain things in a way that the average reader will understand. If you have a case focused on pictures found in, say, the Windows thumb cache files, most people probably don't know what a thumb cache file is, but they know that when they open a picture folder, they see a bunch of small versions of their pictures, and if they click them, then they get to see the whole file. You can explain that Windows has files where they save a smaller version of your pictures in order to make them load faster when you open that folder, and that the location of these files are separate from where the original pictures are stored. So if you delete the original pictures, the thumbnail is probably still sitting there on a whole nother part of the hard drive. So from here, your reader is already kind of connecting the fact that the suspect deleted a bunch of the original pictures and we were only able to recover these low resolution versions of those pictures from a file that the suspect probably didn't even know existed. So it shows that, some evidence was destroyed, but luckily, using some forensic processes, we're still able to get that stuff. So another good way to keep things clear is to define the technical terms or give more context in footnotes. Footnotes are great because if somebody who is more experienced is reading your report, they don't want everything spoon-fed to them. For example, for a term like IP address, it's a really good idea to define IP address, but maybe put that in a footnote because most people already have a good idea of what it is. Same with the example that I have up. You have one person reading this who has never used an iPhone, say, and never heard of iMessages. That little footnote would clear things up a little bit. Whereas if you have somebody who doesn't know or maybe wants a little more context, they can just reference a footnote and it won't make the report look too busy and you won't be giving people information that they probably don't need. It's also always a good idea to have a non-technical person read it and then get their opinion. If they don't understand something, most of your jury probably won't, and that's something that we definitely want to avoid. So limitations. You always want to include the limitations of your examination. We all know that timestamps can sometimes act a little sketchy, GPS is a little buggy, and things like that. It's your job to make sure that the reader understands that the limitations of the technology and the methods that you've used. If you don't address these issues, you're basically leaving yourself open to be attacked on the stand. If the other side knows about the limitations and you didn't mention them, they're going to have a much easier time getting your work thrown out. The report needs to be airtight. Don't leave any loose ends. By covering them in your report early on, you can talk about exactly how the technology works and allows you to explain why you believe that those limitations either played or didn't play a role in your case. So knowing, understanding, and acknowledging the limitations, it only helps your case, whether you're looking to blame the suspect or exonerate your client. It only makes your case stronger, so make sure you cover those things. Then you want to make sure that you're documenting everything. You need to put every little step you took to get to your conclusion. If you plugged a USB device with forensic software to triage evidence on a live suspect PC, you need to document that and note any changes that may have been made to that evidence by doing that. Also note why you took the steps that you did, especially if we're talking about a non-repeatable process. If you were on site and you suspected that a PC had encryption, so you decided to image it live, that's a pretty valid reason to deviate from the normal procedure. Your report should detail that you noted things like the screen was on and maybe you noticed the VeriCrypt icon. Later on in the report, or if you're writing a separate report for the full examination, you can confirm this with whatever findings from, say, the installed programs, the most recently run, etc., things like that. The important thing is that the steps that you took didn't put those artifacts that were related to the crime on there. Also, make sure you include any pictures or videos that you've taken. A good way to make sure that you're making good documentation is to basically look at the report like it's an instruction manual. You need to write this thing so that if you gave the data to any examiner, they should hopefully come to the same conclusions you did, regardless of what tool they use. Make sure you use references accordingly. If you are getting information that isn't in the evidence but in a different examination report or police report, search warrant, you want to make sure that the next person knows where to find that information. You can typically put that information in line. So proofreading. This should go without saying, but make sure you have somebody proofread your report. Don't rely on just spell check. If a report has a lot of spelling or grammar mistakes, that's something that's going to reflect poorly on you and your whole examination. The proofreading should include fact-checking the serial, model, phone, evidence numbers, etc. Make sure all of that stuff is correct. I don't know how many of you have tried to get the IMEI off of some of these newer phones, but you need like a professional grade microscope to get them. You may want to have a second person confirm those numbers or pull it from the actual device if possible. And maybe think about adding a policy to your lab manual. Proofreading should be a part of every lab's process. There should be at least one other person signing off on it before it actually goes out the door. So now I'm going to do a quick demo of a couple of reports for some test cases that have already been examined. And I have one pulled up for W4. And this is basically a VIN cloning case where we have some stolen vehicles and a few conversations between the suspects and changing VIN numbers and things like that. So I've already done an examination on this, and I've already tagged all of the items that I want to export with my report. I have items tagged here, and then I've also made a link, and I've saved this this link graph, and I've saved it for my report. If you don't know how to do that, you basically just go to Save for Report here, and you save it, and then later you can access that so you can throw it on your report later. So just to give you an idea, you know, in this case, I have some communications, some emails and stuff like that. Emails. People are sending pictures of stolen vehicles. They're detailing the VIN numbers, and then they're forging some car titles. So if we go to the thumbnails, you'll just see the same thing: pictures of stolen vehicles, some of the VIN numbers here, and things like that. So this is all stuff that's really important to our report. They've all been tagged, and we want to get that stuff in a report that our readers can understand, right? So I've already filled out some of the information in here just to make this a little bit easier for you guys, so you're not sitting here watching me type all day. So the general, right here under general, you're going to have the report name and the report description. This information here is basically just what you're going to see here under the report navigation pane. The report name will also be the file name for your report. So basically, if you have a lot of reports here for the same case, you're going to want to differentiate that with the report name, and you'll be able to find them here. So the next thing is we want to configure the title page and the custom fields. I've already added a report title here. And then you have the logos. Here you can include your company logo or your whatever organization. If your lab has a separate logo for your organization, you can include that in the center logo. However you want to set that up. Once I produce this report, I'll show you where all of that stuff is located, so you have a good idea of whether you want to use it. So down here you have some custom fields that you can add. The case name, the case created, and report created are all there by default, but you can add things like the investigator. You can add the manager name in here, whatever you want to do. It can just be, you can add as many as you want, and this will basically be in the front page of your report. Then you have the options for headers and footers, table of contents, and summary. Here, you know, these are just things that you might want to keep in your report, or you might choose to leave them out. Basically, just click on the checkbox and to keep it out. For something like table of contents or the summary, you may want to consider taking them out. If you have a really short report, you only have a few emails, maybe you don't need a table of contents for that. It's just going to add a page. It's not going to have a lot of information for your reader. It's going to be kind of redundant. So in cases where you want to include it, obviously if you have a bunch of different tags, you know, it's a 10,000 page report, adding the table of contents is probably a really good idea, because the table of contents will allow them to just click into whatever section they want to get to. So that'll be really useful for your readers. And the section, this is basically where you're able to create the entire body of your report. You can set this up in any way that you could possibly think of. I've already added a section here for emails. Basically, you're going to change the title, the description. I've already set this one up. I want to display these emails as a table, and the page orientation is going to be landscape. The different ways to display here, you can do it as a list, a table, an events timeline, an image gallery. You may want to try a few different things to see what the best way to present your data is. So in this case, I think emails look pretty good in a table. If you have something like a lot of chat messages, things like that, you may want to put that in an events timeline. And if you have things with, it's obviously all pictures, you want to maybe use the image gallery. In this case, I've determined that the table looks pretty good, showing these email columns and artifacts that I want to show everyone. So I'm going to leave that as a table. And the page orientation is pretty nice. You can set that if you want to display data, especially as a table, and you have a lot of columns that you're showing, you may want to show that as landscape because that's just going to give you a little bit more space and you won't have all of those columns scrunched up. So I'm going to keep this because it's a table. I'm going to show that as landscape. And then you have the columns that you want to add. In this case, I've already set these up to show the common email columns that most everyone is familiar with. We have the to, from, subject, sent, received, and source IP. So that's pretty much all set. I'm going to add a couple more sections for some of the images that I tagged earlier. So when you press the Add Section button, you can select the tags, or you can select whatever other artifacts you want to include. If you select any of these artifacts, you'll basically show the entire, for browser history, if you select history, it's going to show the entire history. So if you don't want to show everything, it's a good idea to go back and tag just the things that you want to put in your report, and then you can just go down here to the tags and do it that way. So I have some scanned images of those title documents. These are all images, so I'm going to show that as an image gallery, and I'll leave it as portrait for now. For description, you can just type images of the car titles, and you can choose how you want to sort this stuff by. Typically, if it's emails or something like that, you might want to sort it by date. If it's messages, if it's, you're doing a good timeline, stuff like that, you want to make sure that this is sorted correctly. If you do select the events timeline, you actually won't be able to change any of this. The events timeline is basically the exact same view that you have. I'll save this here. The events timeline is basically the exact same view that you'll have when you're going over here and you select events. Exporting this as an events timeline is basically going to export the data exactly as you see it here. And the next case that I'm going to do is basically just an events timeline, so I'll show you what that looks like. So as I said, this is, that's the conversation. This one will actually be an image gallery. And also note that there's an export original format file, so if you want people to be able to look at those original native files and be able to open them in a native application, you're going to want to select this. And I want to make sure I have it. Yep. So, and then you have the number of columns that you want to show. I'm going to leave this to default as 4. So basically that's just how many image columns you want to see. That can be left in the default. You can remove section, import sections, and export sections however you see fit from other cases. And then you have the section options, include tags and events. These, right as of right now, we only have events timelines under the section options. In this case, it's not really relevant because I'm not exporting anything as a timeline event. And then you have your link graphs. I want to add a saved graph, that graph that I saved earlier, and it's basically just the Tesla email. And you'll be able to show that link graph exactly the same way that it's showing up here. And then I actually want to add one more tag, which is just images of the stolen vehicle. So this is just going to be also displayed as an image gallery. And I also want to export the original format files for that. You can move these around. So after you make them, if something's out of order, you can just move them however you see fit. and that'll basically just follow the order in the body of your report. So finally, we have the output format. So the portable document format, that's just your PDF. If you export it as a PDF, note that you won't be able to make any changes to that. And you can also export as a Microsoft Word. And that's really nice because you can make changes inline. So you could potentially export a report with W4 and just write in your entire narrative right within the report. And that could probably save you a lot of time, and you can go ahead and just give your readers one report with all of the information in it if you choose to do that. That's always an option. So I'm going to produce this report as a Microsoft Word document. And I'm just going to save that to my desktop. And then here we have our report. So in your report, there's going to be one folder. Since we chose to export those native files, you're going to have a folder that contains all that stuff. And then we can go ahead and just open our report here, which is just going to be the Word document. And here you can see your front page. Let me put this next to W4 so that we can see the different options here. So as discussed, your file name up here is going to be the same as the report name that you put under General. Then you have the title page. You're going to have your report title, and then you're going to have the logos here, which you can change to whatever you want. This one up here is your top logo, and this big W4 logo is your center logo. After this, you see all of the custom fields that we had added. You have your table of contents. So if you, like I said, if this is something that you think you don't need for your report, then you can just choose to not include it from here. And then you have your summary page, which just gives you a really good summary of all the data that's in here. So if you have a lot of sources in your case, it might be something, this list here can get pretty long, so you might want to give everybody some information on that. And then you have the types of artifacts. Again, this list can get long, so if that's something you want to keep in there to give everybody a little bit more context about the important stuff that's in the case, then it's something you may want to keep. And then you have your footers here. So title documents and the stolen vehicles. And then we have the that conversation with Dominic, and all of the columns that we selected are here. And then we have that link graph. So, and as I said, because this is basically just a Word document, you can jump in here at any time and add another heading. If you want to add your executive summary after the summary tab, this is where you would add that. And then you can just start typing away, on whatever date, this happened, and basically just add your entire narrative right into this W4 report, which, could save you a little bit of time. So I'm going to save that. And then you also have the option to just save it as a PDF. I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. Just save it in here. And it does take a second for that to finish up. And you can see it loading. This is obviously a quick one, so it doesn't take too long. And this is the PDF report, which looks pretty much the same. All of your stuff here is clickable. So if we want to go straight to the title documents, you can just click on it and it'll go straight there. So if you have dozens of pages, which is pretty common with some of these reports, you kind of want to keep that that table of content so that your users are able to do that. Your pictures here, since we allowed for the native files, you can just click on the file name there, and you can open it up, and that'll basically let you see the original files. So that's pretty useful too. All right, so now I'm going to do my next case. And this is basically a drug case where a bunch of different conversations were taking place between two suspects, and it basically just has to do with the drug sale. I noted some Venmo account information that was used for payment, and then we have some tracking information for a drug package that one of the suspects was nice enough to provide for the drug user. So basically, I want to export just what's in here, and this is just the timeline view. So I'm going to go over here to our report for Tony's PC. Since I've already explained all this stuff, I'm just going to go straight down. When you add a section here, I've already added all of the tags because I have both emails and Skype messages that I want to include. So basically what I did here is just select tags, and that includes the conversation with Tony that took place in Skype, and then the email message that was tagged that contained that tracking number. So I'm just going to cancel that, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select, we can change this to, change the title to drug transaction. You can add more context there in the description if you'd like, and I'm going to use the events timeline here. I'm going to leave it as portrait. I'm going to scroll down, and in this case I want to make sure that I include the tags and I include the notes. So if you go to search, I do want to make sure that these tags are all there because I have two different tags, and then I also want these notes on there because that's going to make the information, the most important information within this timeline, to be easy to find for the reader. So I'm going to keep those notes on there and make sure that these are selected. And I don't have any graphs here, and I'm just going to export this one to PDF. And make a new folder for report 2. And that was a pretty quick one. So I'm going to open that up so you get an idea of what that report looks like. And pretty much everything up here is the same, but this is just basically the timeline view. So you get all your messages in here. They're all in order. If you go down here, you have your all of the notes that you put on there. So that just makes things really easy to read for the user. And because the timeline is important in this case, it's basically all just messages and emails. It's pretty easy to understand what happened. So that's pretty much all I have. I don't see any questions in our chat. So yeah, if you haven't done so already, please look for our next webinar on our website and register for that. You can also access any previous webinars you may have missed on our community forum. If you have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, please let us know. Have a good day, and thank you very much for joining the presentation. Have a good one.